Well, that was a really thought-provoking film. Thank you so much. On behalf of the Seattle Asian American Film Festival, I wanted to thank you all for joining us for our 9th annual festival, and to thank Lisette Flanary. She's the director of Tokyo Hula, and she's joining us remotely from Hawaii. So thank you so much for spending the time.
Aloha mai kako. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching Tokyo Hula, and thank you, Vanessa, and the Seattle Asian American Film Festival.
Thank you. So we have so many questions about this great film. First, I was really shocked by the statistic that there's more people in Japan dancing hula than there are people in Hawaii. When did you learn that hula was so popular in Japan?
Well, I think that, you know, through seeing some Japanese groups perform here in Hawaii, I was always kind of amazed at just like the sheer number of people in the groups that I had seen dance here. I thought, wow, like this is like an army of hula dancers kind of coming out on the stage. And I started doing research and doing some reading. You know, I had never been to Japan actually when I started making this film. I don't speak Japanese. It was just sort of like a fascination that I had with, you know, I wonder what kind of attracts Japanese people to hula. It seems like they're really, really into it. So, you know, from my research, I discovered that there was like a really large number of people dancing hula in Japan. And that number, instead of shrinking, just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it seemed to kind of go in different waves. Like, you know, in the 80s and 90s, there was a big boom of hula. And then, you know, what I was witnessing kind of after that was like this kind of, you know, younger generation of Japanese folks getting really, really interested in hula. So initially for me personally, when I saw them dance, I was kind of amazed at how technically perfect they were when they were dancing. But yeah, I couldn't quite put my finger on, you know, like, oh, this doesn't quite seem exactly like hula as I know it. So I'm sort of interested to find out more about, you know, why do I feel this like slight disconnect when I see folks from Japan kind of dancing hula? And I wonder what brings them to the dance.
Right. Wow. How long did it take you? It felt like there was so much research that went into the film. How long did it take to do the research and then complete the film itself?
Wow, it took a long time. It's
Nice.
almost like embarrassing to say how long it took, but I think that it took a long time for the right reasons. And, you know, I started researching this in 2008, 2009, I think, pretty seriously. And then got a small research and development fund from ITVS and Pacific Islanders and Communications. And that was really where I could finally actually go to Japan and start, you know, meeting with different sensei and talking to different people for the first time versus reading about stuff or hearing about things secondhand, right? And so that was really, you know, it's over 10 years ago now. And I think that, you know, this is the end of a trilogy of films that I set out to make, a trilogy of documentaries about hula. And I really kind of thought that this would actually be the second film after I finished my first film, but because I wanted to give it more time in terms of the research and the fundraising, it ended up being the third installment of the hula trilogy. And really, there were a few challenges that kind of like made that time span longer than I initially wanted it to be. And the main one was definitely like, you know, the language barrier. You know, I had to have translators, I had to have a lot of help when I was in Japan. And even when I shot things, I would have to come home and then have that footage translated, which was a very new experience for me. I'd never really kind of like had so much material that I was like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know what people are saying. So that kind of post-production element took a really long time. And then the funding aspect was also kind of another reason why, you know, I would raise some money and get a grant and then go shoot in Japan and then run out of money very quickly because Japan is kind of an expensive place to go and shoot.
Yeah.
And then come back and kind of be like, oh, now I'm stuck in between these phases of production. So I was super lucky, and, you know, Pacific Islanders and Communications was a huge supporter of the film, and they really kind of helped me cross that finish line.
Oh my goodness. How many trips did you make to do with both the research and the shooting? You must be really familiar with Japan by now.
You know, I think that Japan, even though I've been there a few times, I feel like I could go back a million more times and learn something new. So I, initially, my very first entree into visiting Japan, I was very fortunate. I finished a film called Nakamale, The Men of Hula, with Kumu Hula Robert Casimiro, and my Kumu, Patrick Mapuakane, were actually doing this kind of traveling show throughout Japan called the Pan-Pacific Hula Exhibition. And that was really the first time where I just was going to study and observe and to meet people and to talk with folks and kind of develop the idea. And so I really got to travel all over Japan and talk to a lot of different people. And that really helped me kind of focus, kind of really, really think about who I wanted to feature as a subject and how I wanted to approach the different voices that I wanted to kind of represent in the film. And whereas I always knew that I wanted to represent, a Native Hawaiian perspective with a kumu or a halau that was, from here, but also had a satellite halau in Japan, finding those Japanese teachers and those Japanese halau, that was like, to me, like the most exciting part, but also the most difficult part, because it was way out of my comfort zone. And, culturally, I kind of wanted to make sure that I was approaching everyone respectfully,
Right.
And having the right conversations with the right people too.
Absolutely. And how did you decide which halaus to feature in your film? There were so many and they were all so different and so interesting in their own way. Um, did you meet more than were included in the film and have to kind of select?
Yeah, I definitely talked to a lot of folks who were really gracious with their time and energies. And, for me, what I found really interesting about hula in Japan is that I felt like it was very, there were these different waves of hula booms or explosions in Japan. And I wanted to represent those different generations and different waves historically through different characters. So, for me personally, I felt like Seiko Okamoto sensei, who became a kumu hula as we were shooting this film, she studied under an amazing kumu hula, Aloha Deliri. And I felt like she really had this kind of very strong understanding of hula traditions and sensibilities because of the time that she had spent in Hawaii and also from her kumu, from her teacher. So she was someone that I felt like really kind of represented this idea of, wow, this is what it should be like maybe going forward, right? And, it kind of really, she was just, I really loved her chanting too. Like, I really loved the fact that she kind of really knew what she was dancing and, just had a ton of respect for Hawaiian culture. And, Ku'ulenani Hashimoto is someone who also, in the 70s and 80s, studied with the Hawaiian Kumu, the Zudemeister family. And she is very well respected and, yet sort of represents this sort of generation of folks who, started hula in Japan when it was very like a Japanized version, and then kind of fell into learning more and more about the culture through her connection to a master teacher here in Hawaii.
So nice. You really represented a really broad range of perspectives and takes on hula in Japan. I thought that came across so clearly with all the different people that were in there, from the folks that were very traditional and making sure everyone was doing things kind of the traditional way. And then we saw these little snippets from the competition that didn't look like hula at all. They were making faces and some funny stuff. And I was wondering, I know you were a hula dancer yourself. How did that make you feel, seeing this broad range, and like what do you feel is kind of acceptable along that range of, I guess, authenticity and sticking to tradition?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I feel like as I've gotten older, my ideas of what is traditional and what is acceptable have shifted and changed. And, when I was younger, I think I was much more open to, yeah, it should be very free and whatever. And now as I get older, I'm like, no, I think it should be very, very traditional. So, I mean, I really kind of, my goal in kind of showing like the different perspectives and the different voices and the different thoughts was sort of not to say this is wrong or right, or this is a black and white issue, but to kind of say, hey, this is what's going on, and how can we have a dialogue about this that is constructive and healthy and interesting. And, you know, frankly, you could go anywhere in the world, not just Japan. You could go to any place and find representations of hula that are both, you know, traditional and positive, and some that may not quite be grounded so much in what one would hope. But, you know, I never wanted to point fingers or to kind of say this is a bad thing. But I think that, you know, for a lot of folks, and I think that what will be interesting and what I hope this film kind of brings about is an interesting conversation and a dialogue. Because I know that everyone who was involved in hula, whether you're a dancer or a kumu or a musician or anyone who was involved and kind of knows about what's happening with hula in Japan, no one really talks about it. It's sort of like everyone knows about it, but it's not really kind of something that is a part of an open dialogue. It's sort of like an insider conversation. And my sense is that eventually, you know, Kumu Sani talks about how, like, you know, they love what they're doing in Japan, and they feel like it's important for them to have that presence there and really be there to kind of ensure that what they're teaching is something that they can be proud of. But yet they don't want to be the hula police in Japan, right? So what's sort of interesting is I'm curious to see what happens in the next few years, because I have heard discussions where people are like, you know, maybe we should create a council, or maybe there should be a kind of a larger discussion of not just about hula in Japan, but this idea that hula has gone global, right? In the way that many different art forms have gone global and cultural expressions have gone global. So how do we kind of ensure that what we hope is being transmitted is something that we would still recognize as hula?
Mm-hmm. Did you have any challenges in making the film in Japan? I felt like there was a scene that was really heartbreaking where he was like bringing back awards, and then he was explaining, you know, that he wasn't allowed in that competition because of who he was. I mean, did you face challenges kind of in that same vein? And do you know if they actually changed the rules about that, or did that rule just continue on in that competition?
That's a really good question. That competition actually, oh wow, there were some problems, I think, around like how much influence the Japanese sensei and kumu had because of the way that the events are sort of organized, meaning that, you know, the ticket sales and everything is so dependent on the kumus. And if they withdrew their support, if they withdrew from the competition scene, it could mean a very disastrous end for that event. And to my knowledge, that that particular competition closed and a new one sort of started. It's sort of like a Kamehameha Nui competition that sort of took its place. And from what I understand, I believe that, you know, the rules are a little bit more structured and the guidelines are a little bit clearer. But I think at the time when we were shooting, what I found so interesting about that instance was that, you know, you could have a hula competition in Japan and a Hawaiian group wasn't allowed to perform, right? That to me was kind of mind-blowing and, you know, really strange. And even though I don't think there was any harm meant in it, I think it was really sort of a response to a few different things. I think that, you know, the message was not necessarily a super positive one.
Yeah, right.
I do know that, you know, Kumu Lopaka and Kumu Sani, their halau has only continued to grow and they're doing amazing. So, you know, it was like a tiny little blip, you know, in their presence in Japan. But for me personally, I think that there were a few things that, you know, culturally, like there's just a lot of things that kind of are very difficult to translate. Mm-hmm. Even, you know, even the structure of schools is very, very different in Japan. The competitions were slightly different in Japan. So I think the challenges that I faced were probably nothing compared to someone who was like living there and trying to teach hula there. But, you know, it definitely was a very different experience. Having made quite a few films about hula, this one was a difficult one to navigate, I think, just because of the different kind of cultural norms. You know, I know for myself, I felt like I couldn't quite be my normal self when I was in Japan. Like I couldn't just like cackle with laughter or grab someone and hug someone. You know, I was a much more reserved person when I was in Japan. So that was kind of an interesting experience, to be sure.
All right. And I love that part about the smiling practice. That was really funny. There were just so many moments and so much nuance in your film. I really could tell how much labor and preparation must have gone into it.
Right.
So congratulations again on this film. I wanted to ask as the last question, what are you working on now? Do you have another film in the works?
Well, right now I just did a cut down of Tokyo Hula because we're getting ready for the PBS broadcast. And I'm really excited. It's going to be a part of the Pacific Heartbeat, the 10-year anniversary series on PBS. And that I think we're getting ready for in May. So I'm just kind of finishing up the festival run and just did the broadcast version of the film. And I'm looking forward to just engaging with audiences in any way that I can, because, you know, I spent 10 years making this film and then the pandemic hit. So I really only got to kind of take it to a couple of different festivals. But I feel really excited about the fact that it's going to be broadcast. So.
Oh yeah, we are too, and we cannot wait to help you share that. So just know when that comes out. We'll be really happy to let the world know this great film. Well, I want to thank you again so much for sharing the film with our audience and for joining us on this Q&A. I want to thank the audience as well. So please put in your participant survey. The link is in your confirmation email. That helps us to get grants and sponsorships. And please check out the other programs. We still have tickets available. Just check out our website at seattleaaff.org. And I hope everybody stays safe and stays healthy. And thank you so much again to Lisette for joining us. I really appreciate it. It was a great, great film.
Mahalo. Thank you so much, Vanessa. And take good care, Seattle. Be safe.
Thank you.